So thank you everyone for joining today. What we're going to be focusing on today is how to increase supporter engagement for nonprofits that are utilizing Salesforce. And today we are honored to have Beth Saunders with us. She's the founder of Beth Saunders Associates. She's going to explain a little bit more about herself, give her background, and Beth is going to share some fantastic strategies that have been proven to work with other nonprofits to get their constituents, get their supporters, more engaged, utilizing by tapping into some of the information that we have in Salesforce. Now, as Beth is presenting, you can feel free to utilize the chat window. I will sort of play the role of like Vanna White while Beth is speaking, so I'll sort of monitor what's going on in the chat window. But otherwise, Beth, it's all you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, David, for offering your platform to share this information. It was your post, I think, in the Trailblazer community that said, hey, all my friends and colleagues out there who were intending to be at conferences sharing all that juicy info, right? We don't have that opportunity anymore. So I really appreciate the ability to share this. And it's really, that's what it's about, is sharing some information that will help you make Salesforce even more useful for your organization. So by way of introduction, I'm Beth Saunders, which is hard to forget because my name's Beth, my email's Beth, my company's Beth, so it's a lot of Beth going on. But I've been consulting in the Salesforce space, specifically with nonprofits, for 12 years, and have really gained so much experience learning about nonprofit operations, but also how this technology platform is, I think, really perfectly suited to support you in achieving your mission. And so all that accumulated experience has led me to also focus on a more strategic line of consulting, which is engagement strategy. So we're going to talk about that today because Salesforce is a tool that lets you enact tactics, right? That should be defined within a larger strategy. So we're going to start by, first, David did post a poll. I was curious how many of the people here today actually are working in nonprofit, and you might, if you are like me working with nonprofits, you can answer yes to that also, because most of the content here is really geared towards that area of work because it's very vision and mission focused. It does not mean this is not relevant to the for-profit community though. So in a minute or two, we'll take a look and see how many of the attendees today are in the nonprofit space.
So by the way, as of right now, we have 75% that said yes and 25% said no.
Okay, that's really helpful. So it's largely then this content is very relevant, and I appreciate your joining us today. I thought I'd start out by just saying why we chose the word supporter, which is another fun poll that we can post at any point. I chose that word for two reasons. One, because I have a hard time saying constituent, which is a really popular word in the nonprofit space. A lot of us refer to all of the people who engage with us as constituents. But since I trip over that, I try and find other words. The other reason I chose supporter is that it is a little more general. It can include everything from what you might think of as a customer. A donor supports your organization. Someone who subscribes to even an email campaign or subscribes to other communications is supporting. So everyone who participates is supporting your organization. So that's why I chose that word, but I'm really curious how other people refer to all of those people who participate with your organization. So we just made a fun poll asking you to vote on one of a few words, and we can take a look at that towards the end. Thanks so much, David, for creating those polls.
Yep, and by the way, I put the link to the poll also in the chat. It's really the same link as before. I simply activated that second question, so it's available right now.
Awesome. So hopefully we can have a little fun with that later. So that's what a supporter is. What is engagement? Engagement and engagement strategy is all the ways that people participate with your organization, right? So sometimes, again, in the nonprofit space, we talk about donors. And you'll often hear me say there aren't really donors, there aren't volunteers, there are people. there's always a human at the center of all these interactions, and the donation is the action that connects them to you. The act of becoming a member, joining, is what they do, right? So I like to think of the contact at the center and all those interactions, and not labeling people that way. So engagement is different than moves management. It's bigger than that. Moves management is a fundraising channel within engagement. It's also, engagement strategy is answering the question why. Most of us are very conversant in talking about what we do. We all say the mission of my organization is. And I would challenge you to say, how often do you talk about the vision? So the vision is what your organization is trying to achieve. It's the change you want to make in the world. And your mission is the work you do to achieve that vision. So that's when we say engagement and engagement strategy, that's what we're talking about. So now I'm going to bring up a few slides. Yeah, I know, right? Consulting and presentations, we always have slides. But I did this because it's also nice to have a visual for what we're talking about. I'm just making sure that I share the right thing. All right. And by the way, this whole thing isn't going to be me just talking at you. I'm going to try and run through these slides and convey a bunch of information. And then I'm really interested in having that open conversation to see how many of you are familiar with engagement, how you might be using Salesforce to measure engagement, etc. So please know that this is not you sitting at a conference session where you're supposed to be quiet. This slide is showing us that engagement strategy is made up of many different components. And it's been designed in this way with intention. So there's an internal aspect and an external aspect. And internally, I already mentioned vision, right? So you as an organization determine your vision. You as your organization work together and you determine your mission. You set goals. And this may not be something you're particularly familiar with, but you also want to identify your superpowers. And superpowers are not just what you're great at, what your strengths are, they are unique to you. They are why people will choose you over somebody else. And that's a preview to feeding into value prop. But externally, there's all those ways that you engage the external world, right? You run programs, you offer services, you run classes, you run events, and you offer all those programmatic activities to that broader audience. Probably in the marketing world, you've heard of audience segments, and you might have even heard of personas. So that's your ability to understand all the people externally that want to engage with you. And if you can get to understand them right down to the persona level, you have a really keen ability to target people and offer them things that are truly motivating and interesting to them. So when you have that internal and external components, those are supported by and connected by the value proposition. You can have an organization value proposition. Our organization offers you this value. You can also have value propositions at every persona level. So the more specifically you understand the people engaging with your organization, the more specifically you can express the value you offer them. And again, it's not just what you're good at, it's what makes you unique. The engagement pyramid, which we're going to spend most of the time talking about, is a measurement framework. So I'll just leave it there. And the technology platform supports all of that, right? It's not at the bottom because it's the least important component. It could be one of the most important ones, but it should support your work, right? Technology doesn't drive your work, it supports it. It shouldn't dictate what you do. So that's my technology soapbox, and we will move on and talk a little bit more now about the engagement pyramid. Let's see if this advances. There we go. So the pyramid, first, the pyramid, why a pyramid? We won't keep doing polls, but many of you have probably heard of or maybe thought of engagement as a ladder, right? People climb the engagement ladder and they get higher and higher. We specifically don't use a ladder image because it's very linear and you bump into people along the way. It's only so wide and you can't get past people and you might fall off. And if you come to, you know, so it's very linear. You might have also heard of a funnel. That's usually used in a sales context. And for me, funnels are weeding people out, right? You move from being a lead to being a purchaser. And with engagement, we want to keep everybody in. Everybody wants to be, we want to keep them involved. And the goal is to get them more and more involved to the extent they express they want to be involved. So the idea of the pyramid shows you that everyone is still part of the organization in some way. The shape shows you that the base is wide, again, not because it's less important, it's because people there are engaging less than others. They've committed to you a little less than people at the top. And we naturally expect fewer and fewer people to be deeply, deeply engaged, or highly, highly engaged, however you want to think about it. So the really easy example is followers are people on your email list, and leaders are your board of directors, right? You probably don't have more than 25 board members on your board, but you probably have thousands of people on your email list. If that base is not wide, everything gets out of balance and it falls over. So you need a wide base so that you always have a source of people to call to do more and more. The other thing that pyramid allows us to see is what the mindset is of somebody who might want to become more engaged. So quickly, you can see that someone is paying attention when they're at the base of your pyramid, and then they might spend some time with you and demonstrate they trust you. They'll spend time and money with you. They actually share their expertise. They might influence and engage other people and eventually really start leading the organization with you. So that's what all of this shape is meant to convey, and why we really like the shape of the pyramid shape. The other important thing to know about an engagement pyramid as a measurement tool is that it's actually not flat. So I keep saying we. In my associates, I work largely in engagement with my colleague Cindy, and we've really come to think of the pyramid as three-dimensional. And that's because people that engage with the organization play different roles. And these are just a few sample roles that people can play. Those labels I talked about earlier, we think of people as donors. Well, a donor's journey, right, through engagement, right, might move from attending an event, so they bought a ticket, and eventually they become a major donor. That could be a donor journey, but there's not a separate pyramid for members, right? There's just a different role someone played, and they engaged with you at a different level by playing that role and taking a certain action. So this three-dimensional pyramid shows you that people have different roles, and they might, I'm doing this with my hands, they might go around one level by playing different roles, and they might move up, and they might actually move back down. It's a matter of how much they participate within a period of time and in what role doing what. So that's a mouthful. And at this point, you might be wondering, why are we still talking about pyramids? And why aren't we talking about Salesforce? So I'm moving through this fairly quickly, not because engagement strategy is easy, and not because you can design your strategy really quickly, but because the idea here is to show you how all that information you probably already have in your Salesforce system could help you move towards building your pyramid and starting to understand how much people are involved and engaged. So this might look a little more familiar, right? So now this is just a really quick snapshot in Salesforce of some of the tools that are available to help us identify how people are engaging. Now, I was careful about that. Salesforce can show us how people engage. Only you, your organization, can determine how engaged that is, right? What engagement level, how deeply engaged are they? So some of the examples of the tools of Salesforce provide to us are roll-up summary fields, right? You have a contact record, and we can roll up to the contact lots of information. Now, whether it's a standard roll-up field in Salesforce, which is extremely limited, but I'm sure you're already thinking of all those other tools like Dolores, the declarative lookup rollup summary tool. You can roll up anything you want to almost anything you want. You can also, if you happen to be using NPSP, the Nonprofit Success Pack, we get in that package some huge number of roll-up summary fields, largely based on opportunities, but you can then activate customizable roll-ups. So that's another tool where you can create other kinds of roll-up fields. The NPSP also gives us tools like engagement plans and engagement levels. And I'll make the distinction now that when we talk about the engagement level on the pyramid, those are not engagement levels as in Salesforce engagement levels. Levels is a tool you might use to help you figure out the actual engagement level. But you'd actually need to do a fair amount of work with formula fields, yet another tool in Salesforce to help us measure engagement. But to use levels in this kind of a strategy, you'd really need to extend them a fair amount, use formulas, and I actually did a whole talk on that a couple of years ago if you're interested. Another colleague, Donna Wittig, and I talked about engagement and how to use engagement levels. But this is showing you not only that we can measure certain interactions like gifts, but I circled specifically like this year and last year, because if you remember, engagement is about how often, how much, and when, how recently. And so this particular individual actually doubled, right, their donation activity from one year to another. So they're demonstrating that they are more interested, more engaged, more supportive of your organization. It's up to you to decide what level on the pyramid that would equate to. I also circled campaign history, not because the number of campaigns is important, but because campaigns is an obvious place to measure engagement. You probably run email campaigns, you run events, you run fundraisers, you might run VIP events. All those different activities and events can be tracked as a campaign, but they don't all add the same value. As another aside, I would express that value. When I say value, it's not about how important that person is. It's about how much that action moves you to achieving a goal, your vision, right? It's mission-based, but is that action helping you achieve your vision? So someone being on your email list, are they helping you achieve your vision? That's a rhetorical question. You know, someone who makes a major gift, are they helping you achieve your vision? Somebody who volunteers once a week, all year, are they helping you achieve your vision? They're all contributing at different levels, and it's up to you and only you and your organization to determine how much engagement value that offers. So what I'm pointing out is that these are the tools you can use to measure activity, then you have to add the value. So I created like this custom field, super simple. Put an engagement value in every campaign. Then you can say if someone has a campaign member in that campaign, they might automatically earn a certain amount of points. Points alone don't tell you level. Again, you need to have determined how those points equate to your pyramid. So the strategy part is the framework. The tactics are everything we're looking at here. All right. The all right is not rhetorical. You can ask your questions in just a minute. So here's a sample journey, right? Some of you may even be using special tools like Pardot or Marketing Cloud, right? Those are digital marketing automation tools. And if you don't have an engagement strategy, you might be underutilizing those tools, right? With an engagement strategy, you can set up entire journeys. And these are not highly sophisticated journeys that I'm putting out here, but this is a sample of some obvious things, again, that you can track in Salesforce. So someone on your email list, even though you have their email, you still may not really know them. So they're just sort of following you. But if they attend an event, you've gotten more information from them. They've offered you the opportunity to get to know them. That might be an example of someone moving up to the endorsing level. If they start making donations, or they start taking a role of organizing an event or being on a committee, they're contributing. Then if they actually chair a board committee or they become a sponsor, right, then that represents the level of owning. They own that mission with you. And that right-hand column is showing you really simple tools in Salesforce for how to actually track that information, right? So the idea here is to show you, here's an action, here's how you track it in Salesforce, and a suggestion of what kind of engagement level that might equate to. What you call every level is up to you. These aren't written in any kind of stone. And again, if you don't have volunteers, then clearly volunteering is not going to make an endorser, but some other way to engage, right, is what you would value. And again, if someone volunteers for a year or once a month and stops volunteering, you would notice that and wonder, why is their engagement dropping? Well, maybe they moved, right? That's fair. Or, you know, maybe some things changed in their family situation and they want to be engaged, but you haven't offered them another opportunity. And that's a really big point, is that by having an engagement pyramid and thinking about these journeys, you're going to start noticing whether you've offered people enough opportunities to engage. There's often people who are just waiting for you to invite them in. And you'll often find that you're offering an awful lot to do at the base of your pyramid and a little bit to do at the top. It's building the middle. So again, Salesforce can help you track activity. And if you've put value on these activities, you might start noticing that you've got people at the bottom and the top, and you're losing people. They're just sitting at the bottom waiting to be invited. So after that quick run through, there's a few takeaways, right? There's a lot of different components of engagement strategy. The pyramid in this context, it's super important. It's the measurement framework. It's what all that, the vision and the goals and your programs feed in, right, to the pyramid, and the technology is what supports it and actually helps you visualize your pyramid. The pyramid is super robust. We just talked about how it's all about the middle. It's a pyramid because the journey is winding. It's not flat, it's not linear. And technology, right? We're all using Salesforce. We know it's amazing and it's super powerful. And it could get really cluttered really quickly. I think David has a session on how to declutter your Salesforce org. So if that's you, go look it up and then see what's left that is valuable to help you measure engagement, right? And there's so many tools. There's features and third-party apps that can help you out. So that's the message I wanted to share. I was hoping to share with you today, and I was hoping that it might stir up some interesting conversation. I can stop sharing my screen. I can go back to certain slides if people are interested in seeing something again. So I'll pause there and maybe check the chat for questions.
Caroline actually has a really good question. If you want to ask it verbally, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. If not, I can read it for you.
Sorry, I had to pick up my microphone again. Hi there. Hi, David. Hi, Beth. I was, as I was looking at the pyramid, I was kind of thinking the journey mentions a lot of in-person stuff, you know, events and obviously volunteers and things like that. What kind of thinking have you been doing around how the journey is different in these current times when, you know, organizations aren't seeing people in the flesh, in person?
Thanks for asking that, Caroline. That is really important, right? In that, in fact, in thinking about this session, you know, we would argue that engagement strategy is critical always, right? It's not only critical in times of crisis or in times of major change. And if you have a strategy in place and you revisit it periodically, at a time like this, you would want to be revisiting your strategy and thinking about, if you understand your supporters and your audience, how might they want to be involved? So rather than being able to answer your question with specific tactics like run a webinar, right? I'm talking to you today via webinar because we could not be in person at a conference. So that's a a tool, it's a channel. And from an engagement strategy perspective, right, it's the quote program I'm offering, and people got to be involved in this way. So the key for everybody wondering how to engage people in a remote world is to think about, what are those people, why are they involved? What's the value you have to offer? And how can you deliver that value in a remote setting? People might be able to volunteer in their own communities instead of at your organization's space, right? They might be able to run some kind of a collection or a fundraiser, right? They could spin up online fundraising. So there's all those tactics. It's about understanding the value you offer and how people like to behave and what they might be interested in doing for you, and matching those two things together.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that I think the people who have been very good at thinking about this in the past, about the journey and bringing people along with them engagement, are the ones who are now actually being able to adapt. Because you've kind of built that relationship, haven't you? You've built the loyalty, you've built the trust. And now that the circumstances have changed, you know you can still engage with them.
I agree 100%. And I think it's even more than that, which is those who are leading these kinds of initiatives, or the method of interaction with the, I'll call it community at large, within any organization, whether it's a nonprofit or not, their mindset, those who are able to adapt, it's because their mindset was more strategic and less focused on the technical, the logistics of a trade show, a conference room, a big screen for a presentation. And instead they were focused on the strategic of, we're going to have a gathering, we're going to have a networking event, we're going to have a learning opportunity. Here are the topics that we're going to be offering. Here's the audience that we're going to cater to, and simply pivoting on the method by which it gets executed.
That's exactly right. As an example of one of those tactics, to get very specific, is an organization that I've been involved in for a long time, has their annual gala, right? Like, who here doesn't? So I'm sure you've all heard a lot about virtual galas in this time. And what people have done, what organizations have done, is say, okay, we're going to host this gala over this week. Think about how much you might have spent to attend the gala. Think about the ticket price you might have paid. Think about the outfit you would have purchased. Think about all the money you would have spent, and consider making that donation. And in return, what we're going to do is offer you some sort of takeaway, right? And for this particular organization, they do outdoor programming. So they offered a trail guide, right? You were going to get a package with recipes for food that you could take on a hike, right? And then ideas for hiking in your neighborhood, that kind of thing. And so I thought that was really clever, right? They know that they have people that love their organization because they like to get outdoors and they want to be active, and they can't go to that event. So they asked, what would you have spent? Make the donation, and in return, we're going to help you get outdoors, right? So it's about having your strategy, understanding your audience, knowing the value you have to offer, and then picking the tactic, a different channel, a different opportunity to engage. Let's see. There was a question in here about volunteers for Salesforce, and I see David said, well, we're not getting into like the real technology, but if let's see who asked, Deanne, is there a question you want to ask about like how volunteers for Salesforce might support your tracking engagement? Maybe you want to just mention a little bit more about that.
Hi, Beth. I think what I was really asking is what's important for this organization that I'm working for is the engagement with volunteers, because it's all about medical practitioners who are helping out during disasters or climate change, and to keep them involved, always bringing them in. Are there any other forms of engagement? Because volunteers play a big role to keep this organization going.
I think we're going to find that our responses and the conversation is going to start sounding pretty familiar. It's, you understand that you have medical practitioners, I think you said, right, who are volunteering. So they have a specific skill set to offer, and you have a vision you're trying to achieve with some goals. Is there something you can imagine where their skills can help you achieve another goal? Maybe something you've never asked them before, right? I think we're often afraid to ask and always pleasantly surprised when we do, right? So what do we say? If you don't ASK, you don't GET. So if you can think of other things that those medical practitioners can offer you in this particular time, if they can't volunteer at your specific space, right? Or if they can't join in a group to volunteer, maybe they can do that same volunteer work independently in their own community. Maybe they can be advocating for you, right? Again, those are all the tactics. What you, and don't be afraid to try something out, right? Spin up a volunteer campaign, right? Because Volunteers for Salesforce also runs on campaigns. Set one up, let people sign up to do something in their own community, maybe survey them and ask them for their ideas. Sometimes people have a lot of ideas and they're just waiting for you to ask. I think Volunteers for Salesforce, there's some debate, right, in this nonprofit Salesforce community about leaning on campaigns. I happen to be a fan. Not everyone's a big fan of campaigns, but they're just built, they're kind of ready to go for measuring engagement. I hope that was somewhat helpful, right? We're trying to spur the conversation about matching up what you know about the people who are involved in your organization. And we'll take another question in just a second, because I'm thinking, like, you may think, but I don't really know that much. I bet you do. If you took some of this downtime, right, this unfortunate, unexpected, forced upon us downtime to data mine, run some reports, see what you can find about those people in Salesforce. It's a great way to start understanding your supporters better. And then say, huh, these people have actually done this one thing an awful lot. I wonder if there's a variation of that activity we could offer. What else?
Does anyone else have any other questions or related topics that you'd like to focus on?
I'm wondering if people use other tools to track their programming, or if anyone is already, you know, I say tracking, counting, measuring, summing, totaling kinds of activities, and you have a handle. Does anybody have a story like that they'd like to share? I could pick on Deanne, say you have volunteers. Do you keep roll-up summaries on the contact to show like volunteer hours or types of volunteer activities?
So currently, actually, Integrated Healers Action Network is moving from Flipcause to Salesforce. So I'm helping them set up Volunteer for Salesforce engagement. And that's why I was asking questions. And yes, roll-up summary is part of some of the things that we want to incorporate.
Well, great. Since you're at this beginning of the Salesforce journey, now you might want to think about incorporating some of these concepts, right? Of taking the idea of a volunteer activity, and if you have different kinds of volunteering, how much value do they add to achieving your vision? And put a value on it right out of the gate and just see where you end up with that, right? So count volunteer hours, maybe count volunteer events, and then throw a value on them and start seeing if people are engaging at different levels. There's no right or wrong, right? You got to try it out and see what the data shows you, and then revisit your approach based on what you learned from that.
Anyone else, any other questions or insights related to the strategies that Beth shared?
I had that self-serving poll, right? I was making light of the word constituent earlier, but I was curious, did anybody vote? Do you have a favorite word for how you refer to everyone?
Let me go
Right.
ahead and cut and paste it one more time for everyone to bring it to the forefront of the, give me 1 second here to bring it to the forefront of the chat. And then I'll share my screen. So let's go over here and let's do share screen, and let's do it this way. So now we should all be able to see the live real results that we have here. So members comes in at 33%. Oh, as well as constituents. Look at that. It's a tie. Huh?
I know, right? I guess I need to learn how to say that.
Yeah, it looks like customers, I'm not surprised that customers is at something like 8%.
Yeah. We don't really think of people as customers in the nonprofit space. It's very corporate. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, I hope that everyone takes away a little something new. And I really appreciate everyone's attention and attendance. I really would love to learn more about how people are using Salesforce, right, to support their engagement and outreach. So if you feel like sharing that and your stories another time, feel free to reach out. And David, thanks so much for your platform.
Yep, my pleasure. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a great day. See you soon. Bye-bye.